start with the champs.
People that want to come play in this offense. And I think when you watch what they did today, if you're watching from home, you're saying, man, I'd love to play in that offense.
ABC, always be Cruton. Georgia, the national champs, the defending champs, they lost basically their entire defense, right, to the NFL. Still playing great D, but it wasn't even the D that was the headline from week 1. It was the offense hammering like they did, beat Oregon 49-3, and that is the spotlight we use to start after week 1 of the college football season. The champs jumping up to number 2 ahead of Ohio State. So, is Georgia's start what you want to start with here? Could it be the way Notre Dame Ohio State played out, or Anthony Richardson in the revolution for Florida, or Florida State beating LSU and Brian Kelly's new family? Harry Lyles Jr., you can start anywhere in the world. Go ahead.
I'm going to start with the defending national champions. I'm going to start with Georgia. I think one thing that everybody wanted to see out of them this year is how do they look? How do they rebound? Not just because they are the defending champions, but because they had one of the best defenses we've ever seen in college football history lose a bunch of guys to the NFL. So they come out and they still look amazing, right? Like they reloaded in the way that Alabama is reloaded. I think we could put Georgia in that same class, but more importantly,
Line from week 1, was it how Georgia looked offensively?
Yeah, Emily, you're the best. Stetson Bennett, if you could, he's going to stay there until he's 30. He's making about $1 million a year in NIL, so he's doing all right for himself. But, when you think about Georgia, they're coming off of winning a national championship, so it's the first time in 41 years they come in as the defending champs. All the players they lost to the NFL, like Harry mentioned. And then, of course, you have the idea, you're in the SEC, the hangover, the whole thing. How good did they look? I mean, come on, man. That's like Alabama class when Alabama comes back from winning a national championship. But I want to focus on one other team, though. And I know they're probably not going to be in the mix, but how about Florida State going down and beating LSU? Now, they got a couple of breaks. Special teams had something to do with it, but that was a big-time performance, and their special teams came through right at the last second to win that game. Florida State 2-0.
Okay,
for a long time.
So Georgia and Florida State for you. One thing on Georgia, can we just say this for a second? They are the champions, the defending champions. You don't need to bring up Alabama every time you bring up Georgia. Georgia won it all last year. They earned, well, maybe, Emily, you didn't do that. My bad. Got a little carried away. George Sedano, now to you.
Tony, I'm going to stay in the SEC. Those are all great answers.
How upset will Michael Irvin be?
The Florida Gators, who jumped from outside of the top 25 to number 12 in the AP poll today, and specifically Anthony Richardson, okay? You're talking about a kid who last year barely saw any time, even though we did see glimpses of how good he was. He jumped in the Heisman race from a 50-1 shot to now cut that in half to 25-1. I believe he's the 5th quarterback in those particular odds. And it just goes to show you that despite Florida being unranked, the cupboard was not as bare there as people thought.
Anthony Richardson, revolution. Some of the highlights there already. You can see it. Put it in the package when we get to November and December. Refocus here now on Ohio State. Because I know you all got the mutes from your other panel, and Frank, you were the only one on the show Friday. But 4 panelists guaranteed it was going to be a half 100. So to come out like they did, only get 24 on the board, it was a bottled-up offense. Ryan Day said after the game, we needed a game like that. That's what coaches say. after games like that. Frank, what did you see and what didn't you see from the Buckeyes?
Well, also, when Ohio State played a big game against Michigan, all we talked about was their defense being unable to stop the run. I thought their defense came up with some big moments. Remember, for Notre Dame, and we mentioned this as well, that was a loss in theory, but they didn't really lose any ground, because if they could run the table, they're going to have a very good chance of making it to the playoff. You're going on the road. You have a first-year head coach, and to play like that was an impressive performance for a team that lost a game.
Okay.
Ohio State, it's still Ohio State. I'm not going to go crazy over winning at home but not blowing
George
somebody out.
Sedana?
The Notre Dame Fighting Irish are the 5th best team in the country, I believe, coming into that game. So I'm not surprised that they were in that particular game. Their head coach is a defensive mastermind, despite it being his first game. I know he coached as an interim coach in the bowl game, but this is a guy that, he's had all offseason to prepare for this one juggernaut of a team, and they are a juggernaut, but he's certainly worthy, and this team is certainly worthy. This isn't, your dad's Notre Dame team, and maybe your granddad's Notre Dame team when they were good enough to compete for championships. I think this team is headed in the right direction.
So we were missing that side of the argument last week because it was a 17-point spread. Nobody thought they could even, and I heard it, 100, Ohio State. They're putting it up, Emily Kaplan.
Okay, I think that Frank was bang on here, things that I don't say often, but this was about the defense, because for Ohio State, the big questions going to this year was how are they going to adjust to this new defensive scheme?
Exactly.
Quarterback pressures were there. They limited them to 72 yards in the entire second half, and Notre Dame's final 6 possessions were all punts. And for me, this just showed that the Ohio State is Big Tens to lose, especially because Michigan, the closest to them, is still having a quarterback competition. And can we just talk for a second about how ridiculous this is, that Harbaugh says that each of his guys is going to get one start, and then on McNamara's start, he starts McCarthy in the second half and lets him outshine him. Like, what is he even doing?
So you don't think that was biblical in any way, then, what Harbaugh
not.
was doing?
No.
And Harry Lyles Jr., to hear Ryan Day say, we needed a game like that. Do you agree with that?
Perhaps Ohio State always kind of starts slow during the year. I think that with a team on paper is definitely one of the 3 best teams in the country. I don't know that you need a game like that because you should always look like one of the 3 best teams in the country. But to me, the big winners here are Notre Dame, because you played one of the 3 best teams in the country really well. Like Frank said, if you win out, Ohio State wins out, you're going to be in the playoff discussion. And if we want to sprinkle some petty on this, if you're a Notre Dame fan, that's good news. But the better news is the way that Brian Kelly lost that game with LSU after going on a 99-yard drive, only to have the game-tying point after block. That's pretty good if you're a Notre Dame.
All right, so you're viewing it from that perspective. It was an L in the family for Brian Kelly. 2 muff punts and the block field goal and the missed extra point at the end, or block extra point. That was one of the big moves of the offseason. Lincoln Riley to USC, Mario Cristobal to Miami. Well, they both had scheduled routes, and they delivered, so it wasn't the same thing that Brian Kelly had. George, you were actually on the call for the Miami game. Love that. What did you see specifically there first?
Well, Tony, the time I spent with Mario Cristobal this past week was both for the game and for a feature that's going to air on Game Day in a couple weeks. And it was basically him kind of shouting down all the noise that over the years we've always heard, oh, the U is back. Is the U back? Is it going to be back? And he's like, look, enough of that stuff. You can't slogan your way to victories. You got to work hard. And Miami had become a little bit of a finesse team that was kind of living off its past, but not playing the way that those old guys did. And Mario Cristobal is a 2-time champion at the University of Miami, was a coach, an assistant coach at the University of Miami. So if anyone understands what it takes to win there, it's going to be him, and he's instilling that into these particular guys. Now, with Lincoln Riley, I'm not surprised at all that they put up a 70-burger on Rice. Now, the question will be, because a lot of his transfers came on offense, including Travis Dye, the running back who came from Oregon, who played for Cristobal last year, but defensively, can they hang defensively? Because Rice is not necessarily going to test their defense the way some of these other teams in the Pac-12 can.
Right. I mean, with both the Cristobal and Riley first games, it's not just like, oh, you won by 70. Well, how come you didn't win by 80? You know, Frank Isola, to you.
And I sat here on Friday. I tried to tell you my surprise team, or my team I think could be a wild card.
Was USC,
fourth
right?
Spot maybe in the playoffs would be USC. Lincoln Riley yesterday turned 39 years old. The day before, he had an impressive debut. They're so talented. They brought in a lot of transfers. And one thing about Miami, and George, you have to admit, it's the media and the fans there that live in the past. Miami hasn't done anything in 20 years. You guys still talk like it's Michael Irvin, Jerome Brown.
You guys. Who do you mean, you guys?
Haven't done anything.
Who do you mean, you guys? Harry Lyles Jr.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think another thing I would be remiss, and I want to mention this, guys, the great start that we had to this college football weekend was the bringing back of the backyard brawl between Pitt and West Virginia. There's been a lot of talk about conference realignment. If we continue to go down this path, which we are, right, we're going to have USC playing teams like Rutgers. You lose great rivalries like that one. That's another thing that stuck out to me this weekend that I think
saw you on the sidelines. You told the story of the PA announcer getting thrown out of a game and then losing his job. Just tell that story one more time, please.
So yeah, during, I believe it was the 1994 edition of the Backyard Brawl, Pitt and West Virginia obviously playing. Don Ireland, the public address announcer at the time, made a couple of pre-planned announcements, one of which, if you have a tractor in the parking lot with the license plate EIEIO, you need to move your vehicle. And so yes, he had to resign, but later got his job back, so I guess that was good news for Mr. Ireland.
Love those stories. If you had one game to watch every opening week, it has to be, for me, an Appalachian State game, because they always play somebody big, and they're always right there. The last 3 minutes of Appalachian State, North Carolina, was vertigo-inducing. NC got the win 63-61. Meanwhile, one other game I got to mention, Iowa beat South Dakota State 7-3. Do any of you know how Iowa got to 7?
Oh, two safeties and a field goal.
Yes, George. Yes, Harry. So aliens coming down to earth, if they watch those two games.
Report brought to you by Chase.
Stronger and faster. I know Nadal mentioned that he played poorly and Francis played better, but I just don't think that's enough credit for Francis, and especially when you consider that Nadal had won 27 straight against Americans and 22 overall.
Emily Kaplan.
Yeah, this to me is all about Tiafoe, and it's, you know, he's been coming up for a while, but sometimes when you're a young person on the scene, you have imposter syndrome, whether you realize it or not, and in these situations you say, I'm so grateful for the opportunity, or, you know, you get respect. And what I heard from him was a player saying that I belong, because not only did he not remember what he said, he also said, I played unbelievable tennis, and he worked hard to be here, he owned that court, he owned that crowd, and he looked amazing.
Great stuff, Emily. Harry Lyle Jr.
Yeah, for me, it's Tiafoe as well, and it's because he really understood the moment. And, you know, he mentioned he was glad that his folks were there to see him, but he was glad to see him there to knock off what he called one of the Mount Rushmore guys, because in this era of tennis, the past 2 decades, if you're playing against Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, good luck. I mean, anytime you can get a win against one of these guys, it is a major accomplishment, and it showed after the match, both in his emotion and his words, that he understood how big that was, and it was just cool to watch.
2003, the last time Tony gave me a good score, the last time an American won a major, Andy Roddick. That is a long time ago, and now it really is open for Tiafoe, who moves on the court the way a young Nadal did. Remember now, Zverev broken ankle isn't here. Djokovic, because of vaccination status, can't play. Medvedev got knocked out by Kyrgios. But Kyrgios, and I'm lucky enough, I'm going to be there tonight. The way that he's playing made it to the finals of Wimbledon. Be good to see those two match up at some point.
I'm going to be lucky, or Kyrgios is going to be lucky that I'm there tonight. Are you saying, Frank Isola? Wow,
yeah,
Kyrgios and Isola in the same place at the same time. Wow. We'll move on. Buy or sell 2. NL East lead down to 1 now for New York. Mets at Pirates this week, then Miami later in the week. Atlanta at Oakland, then Seattle. Emily, any concern for New York here? They've had the lead all year. The swoon is not a swoon when you compare it to what the other team in New York's doing, but Atlanta and the way they're charging here. What's the buy? What's the sell?
Of course there's concern for the Mets because they're starting to look old, but this to me is all about the Braves, because since June 1st, they've been playing at a 116 win pace. They're looking young, they're looking energetic. This to me is about the defending champs looking like defending champs. And you know what? The Mets can feel good because they're 9-7 against Atlanta, and they have a series at the end of September that could decide.
Harry Lyles.
Yeah, I'm buying that this is the Braves' charge. The Mets should absolutely be worried. These are the World Series champions, and they are a lot better than they were last year. And Ronald Acuna, that knee is still really giving him fits. Ozzie Albies is supposed to be coming back soon. And they get the Mets 3 more times, all at home. I think the Braves are looking really good.
The way it's played out, that could be a tiebreaker for the division, Frank Isola. Does the division matter? How important is it? Should the Mets be worried?
100% it's huge. I mean, here's a team, the Mets, have been in first place since April 12th. It's 150 days, and they have a history over the past 20 years of blowing leads in September. And Buck Showalter is a great manager. The playoff success, however, has not been there.
George Sedano, is everything as dark and dreary for the Mets as this panel just made it out to see?
Yeah, red alert for the Mets, Tony. 72% win percentage for the Braves. They're still charging moving forward. And they're going to have the 1 and 2 in the Rookie of the Year voting, I think, with Strider and Harris. I mean, Strider's been putting up numbers. He's got 12 one-run games, and Harris has been fantastic at the plate. They are surging at the right time. I actually think the Mets are going to be in the rearview mirror soon.
You're telling me you don't want to go into the postseason with Max Scherzer and with Jacob deGrom as your starters? That's something you're not interested in, I'm hearing.
I'll take that.
No, I'm interested, but Max Scherzer also complained about a dead arm last year. Let's not forget about that. He's getting old.
Buy or sell 3. Aces Storm, Game 4 tonight. Season on the line for Seattle. You all know Saturday's instant classic, which, if it went the other way, if Sue Bird's 3 held up, then it would be Las Vegas facing elimination. Harry Lyles, what you buy, what you sell going into tonight?
I'm buying that was probably the best WNBA playoff game that we've ever seen. I think for this game going forward, we're in for a treat. There's enough star power on both sides. In the last 68 seconds of that game, you got buckets from Aja Wilson, Chelsea Gray, Jackie Young, and Raquana Williams. As far as the Storm goes, obviously you got Brianna Stewart, and Sue Bird is playing for her career. This is going to be must-watch television. Fine time. I got the Storm.
Frank Isola?
I have the Aces, and by the way, I mean, that is a brutal loss if you're Seattle. But how about Becky Hammon? All the hype surrounding her when she was an assistant coach in San Antonio is making a ton of money in the WNBA, draws up a great play late for that basket.
Right?
She's having a terrific season.
Talk about execution down the stretch for both teams in regulation. George Sedano.
I got the Aces in this one, Tony. Aja Wilson, 30-10 in back-to-back playoff games, has never been done in WNBA history. And look, as much as I want Seattle to make this a real series again, I think they can, but I just think the Aces are too strong.
Yeah, this to me is all about Aja Wilson. Yes, Chelsea Gray has been absolutely unbelievable, but how poorly Aja played in Game 1 and to rebound in the next 2 games the way she did. Already won Defensive Player of the Year. She could go for the sweep of regular season MVP and maybe Finals MVP at this point.
Such a small margin, though, between, winning and losing on Saturday, and now the season's on the line. Season was on the line for Lyles. And Isola there couldn't come.
I want to make you earn it. Remember, Tommy Maddox started Ben Roethlisberger's rookie season.
Emily?
There was a clerical error. It was thinking that if you put Mason Rudolph at number 2, a trade market would develop. But when that didn't happen in 24 hours, they fixed the error.
Not buying that one. Not buying that one at all, Kaplan. We'll move on. Showdown 2. Gary Sanchez this weekend. He had a home run against his old team. Went 473 feet. That's great. But maybe the highlight of his weekend and year was that he did not get hit in the face here. Oh, this could have been a disaster. What happened here, Emily Kaplan? Who's to blame?
Yeah, so you can nearly get decapitated by a teammate and blame him only if you're going to hit a home run like that the next night against your former team. I don't make up the rules. That's just what they are.
George Sedano?